We made this channel about maybe 24 months ago because I thought the world was kind of going insane and kind of getting crazy. And I wanted to make sense of it, firstly, for myself, so I could navigate it better in my happiness and my career and my financial freedom. And so we've been following this infinite money printing where we're getting to this scenario where everyone's realizing inflation's happening. We're having populist uprisings seemingly all over the world. Media ratings have never been lower. There's never been a higher level of distrust in media institutions and political regimes. And we're going to make sense of all that on today's show. Joining me is my friend Steve Penny. He's a creator of Silver Chartist. It is the best free newsletter out there to help you make sense of everything that's happening from an economic and a macro finance perspective, so that even though the world's getting crazier, you can find the opportunities for investing gold stocks, silver stocks, commodities, uranium, so that you can create financial freedom in this seemingly more bizarre world that we're headed into. So be sure to check out Silver Chartist. It's the best free newsletter out there to help you get financial independence and make sense of what's happening. It's free and it's linked in the description and pinned to the comments right there down below. And make sure you hit the like button on this video. Our sponsor today is Vizsla Silver, one of our favorite silver and gold mining stocks. We want to thank Vizsla Silver for being our mining stock sponsor. And it's good to see you, Steve.
You bet, Jake. Good to connect again, and thanks for inviting me back.
Yes, you and I have been talking regularly on these broadcasts throughout the last 24 months, where the world's gotten more and more interesting, to where, man, I tell you, inflation is way more out of control than people realize. Everyone knows it's happening now, but I tell you, like, looking around at houses, looking around at cars, and looking around at so many places having severe product shortages in grocery stores, empty shelves. And it's quite a bizarre situation. And you and I have been following this whole thing. And now we're at this place where we're right on the edge. And I wonder, how do you define this moment in history right now? Because we're certainly in uncharted waters.
Yeah, 100%. And going back over the last 18, 24 months or so, we've correctly anticipated a lot of the macro events. We've been pretty close to, pretty accurate. However, what has caught me by surprise, I shouldn't say by surprise, but what's surprising is silver and gold's lackluster performance in this inflationary environment. And I think what's happening here is the general market participants are acknowledging inflation right now, but they still have faith in the Fed. And when they expect the Fed to get out ahead of this. So when the Fed talks about tapering and raising interest rates and reducing its balance sheet, the general market participants think they're going to get out ahead of this and squash inflation, and we're going to be able to return to normal. Now, that's mathematically impossible to happen, but right now that's what the general market believes. And once that narrative crumbles, which I expect to happen probably sometime in 2022, I think that's when we see silver and gold really start to move to the upside.
When you say seeing that start to crumble, what do you mean by that?
So basically, the Federal Reserve is between a rock and a hard place. They have to choose between fighting inflation and collapsing the markets, because the markets can't handle higher interest rates. So that what they're trying to do right now is thread the needle and give the perception, or give the impression, that they are fighting inflation and that they're going to get ahead of it. But I am highly confident that they're going to stay behind the curve on fighting inflation. And, eventually the market's going to realize that. And as inflation continues to be higher than nominal interest rates, that's going to crush and put pressure on the average everyday consumer. And the Fed's going to be forced to sacrifice the dollar. And that's when silver and gold and other commodities too tend to take off.
Is that a moment in time? Because we're at that place where nobody knows, is the stock market going to crash, and are we headed back to the Stone Ages, or are they going a la Venezuela or a la Zimbabwe? In what trajectory are they going? And you said the midterms are coming up soon. It almost seemed, I said to you before we were on air, almost seems like political suicide if they raise rates. Are they just giving the appearance of it before we head towards a next ceiling or stage of inflation?
Well, making exact forecasts over short time frames is, it's tough. But I see this as the most likely scenario. Is eventually we're going to see about a 10 to 20% pullback in general equities due to the tightening policies of the Federal Reserve, and they can't have that. So that's going to force them to reverse course and open up the monetary spigots again. And I think that'll be the point where market participants realize that they have no control. The Fed has lost control, and that inflation is here to stay, and that people are going to seek the safety of silver and gold and commodities in general at that point. So I'm looking for a 10 to 20% stock market correction at some point this year, Fed to reverse policy or reverse course on tightening, and that's going to be rocket fuel for silver and gold.
And that's the moment in time at which people realize, all right, we're going higher. And then that's when, as a result, there's an exit, a higher level of exit, perhaps out of savings. So then it moves more to equities, it moves more to the stock market, it moves more to commodities, and you get that next, I guess you would say, pump in inflation or in asset prices. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a lot of other dynamics in there as well. Once gold and silver begin to outperform general equities, generalist investors and institutions are going to take notice of that. People who aren't necessarily gold bugs, they're just seeking performance. And if they see one asset class start to outperform others, they pile in, and it becomes a self-fulfilling, mechanism. And that all lies ahead for silver and gold. And I do think 2022 is it's highly likely for that to begin.
Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter and former CEO of it, he said recently, hyperinflation is going to change everything. And it sounds like a out there statement, especially from a guy who seems like he's out there a little bit. But when I rationally think about this situation we're in, where we're having legitimate, all of the signs that when we would talk about Venezuela or Zimbabwe, we're actually having them. It's not something to laugh about, really, but what else can you do except for laugh at how insane it is? From labor shortages to supply chain shortages to food shortages to gas prices. Remind you that the stuff in Kazakhstan was set off because the government removed a price cap on gas, on oil, and it had a pretty much an overnight move in the cost of energy and thus the cost of living, and people revolted. And we're seeing a lot of these types of things. And I used to think that it would be manageable a little more, but I don't know what they can do other than give the appearance they're going to do something and basically hope that the system doesn't crash. And I wonder, what do you think about that?
Yeah, Jim Sinclair calls it MOPE, or management of perspective economics. And basically it's trying to shift people's perception of the markets as opposed to, reality, because they can't alter reality. And, you talk about hyperinflation. I do give it about, roughly 30, 40% chance of actually happening, hyperinflation. But to some people that may sound crazy, but I would think the burden of proof, or the burden falls on those who say we can't have hyperinflation, because it's a fact that on our current trajectory, if we continue the exact policies that we're doing, hyperinflation will be the result. So if you think we're not going to have hyperinflation, you think that the Fed is eventually going to do the right thing. And I'm not sure I see that happening, because to do the right thing would result in a deflationary collapse that would be, terrible in the short term. It's needed. It would be the cleansing that would be needed to rebuild from a solid foundation. But all the blame would fall on the politicians in a deflationary contraction, and they don't want that. So I think they're going to continue to kick the can down the road as far as they possibly can until there's a currency crisis. And I think a currency crisis is all but inevitable. And in such a currency crisis, silver and gold are historically the prime beneficiaries 100% of the time, going back millennia.
I'm normally the one that asks the questions, not gives the answers. And I've listened to a lot of people. I've done a lot of these conversations, and for a long time, people have been saying this stuff. But, and it seems like when you hear it at first, it's like, all right. But when you say the burden of proof is on the people that don't think we're headed towards a currency crisis, I think objectively, regardless of where you stand, if you just ask yourself, are governments going to continue to print infinite money?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes. And so then the question is, what's on the other side of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's happening faster than I thought it was. I can't believe it. It's getting stuff's getting expensive, and you're seeing it everywhere. And I just wonder what's on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two thoughts there is to the analyst out there who says, "Oh, currency crisis, that's never going to happen." I would ask them, "Well, how is it not going to happen? Explain to me exactly how is that not going to happen?"
I guess the only answer people give, they give a couple. They say one, that eventually they'll tighten. You said here's why you don't think that it will happen, and the other is kind of like a cliche, like they say, never bet against the ingenuity of America. But I get it from like a spiritual perspective of like the freedom that encapsulates in the the ingenuity that encapsulates American entrepreneurialism. But you're talking about the entire system.
Mm-hmm. So right now, inflation's running about 7% using the government data, which is highly flawed.
Yeah.
It's obviously much
That's
higher.
a lot too for their would you have thought 24 months ago they'd be saying inflation was at 7%? No way.
Right, exactly. So in that scenario, they would to squash that, they would have to raise interest rates to above 7%. So let's just say they went to 9%.
Jeez. I didn't even think about that. Oh my God, that would be disastrous. The housing market would collapse instantly.
Yeah, and right now the national debt, it's approaching 30 trillion. So for easy math, let's just say 30 trillion, and they raise interest rates to 9%. Well, 9% of 30 trillion, that's almost $3 trillion a year of interest expenses that the government would have to pay to raise interest rates. $3 trillion. Well, they only collect somewhere around $4 trillion of taxes every year. That would consume the entire federal budget, just interest on the debt, almost. So that just goes to show the predicament they're in. And
I guess that's why commies like 90% income tax then, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I use the word predicament intentionally because problems have solutions, predicaments have managed outcomes, and there's no solution to this problem. There's only different managed outcomes.
What do you mean by managed outcomes?
Well, you can manage. It's like a plane coming in for a crash landing. You can manage your options, but there's no solution to, if your engines are out, You
can manage them too. They think they're so smart because they all went to freaking Ivy League schools, and they all, they're all in this elite bubble that is so far detached from what anyone listening to this, from you, from me, from anyone we know is seeing the world. They see it through, the most elitist of elite. They think everything is manageable through behavioral sciences. And what you're realizing is this actually only is to a point, because ultimately it's a psychological component. And now we're allowed to talk about this with all the whole COVID narrative falling apart. For 24 months, you and I could only talk about this off air, but now Dr. Rochelle Lewinsky, Lewinsky was another one of them. And she's now walking back everything and saying that, the vast majority of these COVID deaths were from people with 4 comorbidities. So I think 75%. I mean, literally we had to talk off air and say, hey, if we talk about this, and we would send each other the CDC stats about it. And so now the media is backtracking, or even having like Joe Rogan's, Joe Rogan's pet dog, Brian Stelter on CNN, is even, trying to pretend he's outraged about these COVID stats, and they're all trying to downplay it. And why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that because they see polls we don't see.
Yep.
Not only are media ratings crashing, but the trust. You're literally seeing incredible smashes in private political polls coming up into midterms. And so they're reversing course. And there's actually a clip of Oliver Darcy. I'm going to find it and have it play right now. So in that clip with Oliver Darcy, he basically is saying, Steve, he's like, well, I'm noticing that the media is seeing the world through a different bubble than your average person, and they're no longer, living their lives wanting to be, locked in their house from COVID. And it's important that we start changing the way we're communicating our messaging, because they're becoming disinterested in it, because we need to help make sure they get the right information. And he was basically saying they realize no one's listening to them anymore, so they need to change their messaging so people will listen to them again. And so the psychological trust has been lost. And there's no difference between a psychological loss in institutions, in the political class, as there is to currencies. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. The things you're saying are reminding me of a book called The Fourth Turning. And one of the key principles of that book is loss of faith in institutions. And we're seeing that right now, loss of faith in all kinds of institutions, banking systems, higher learning, the medical system, all kinds of things. So, I think we're headed into, some tumultuous times, but that doesn't mean that you can't prosper in the midst of that if you are forward thinking and independent thinking.
Now, loss of faith in institutions. The question to me is just, how much do people wake up to the entire fiat monetary system? Like, you're even having like the president of El Salvador. I don't know if you've seen any of his tweets. He's like straight up like just talking about how the entire fiat system, the US dollar, the Federal Reserve, how it's just the central banks, how it's just this massive fraud. And you're seeing a lot of people waking up. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we are, which is very encouraging. I think there's still a lot of room to go for people recognizing, okay, they see what's happening, so what do I do about it? And not to keep harping on silver and gold every 2 seconds, but they are the prime beneficiaries in this environment going back millennia. So to me, it's inevitable that at some point the masses are going to look to get allocation of physical precious metals.
Or the loss in the currency is so great that the same people that have been running this behavioral science experiment with fiat currencies and printing an infinite amount and buying back stocks and enslaving the whole working and middle class and poor people with debt on credit cards from fiat money that doesn't exist, and they're paying 17 per, creating this literally the worst fraud that you could possibly imagine. And so they suppress gold and silver as a way to keep people in the arena. But if people are exiting the arena, which makes them pull the next string, and the next string is, is manipulating the price of metals to the actual upside, and maybe issuing some type of new currency or accounting systems. How likely is it that we see the swing of gold to the polar opposite side when people are exiting the arena psychologically of the fiat game?
Yeah, 100%. But earlier you mentioned, what awaits on the other side. I have no doubt that somewhere in the drawers of the IMF or the Federal Reserve, they've got the plans in place for a new monetary system. And that may sound extreme, but there's a new global monetary system every 40 to 50 years. Going back to 1944 with Bretton Woods, and 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. So we're due for a new monetary system. And I have no doubt that they have the plans in place. You can actually go kind of see what they're thinking if you go to imf.org and read some of their white papers. It's in, highly technical jargon, and I feel like they're the most transparent on those papers because they know most people won't read them or understand them. But so that's one answer. They have a
What's
plan.
in there?
Well, there's a lot of talk about the use of gold, special drawing rights, and blockchain based cryptocurrencies or
Oh, so they talk about a centralized cryptocurrency issued by them.
yeah, and it's kind of like an exchange of ideas between these elites. So you don't know which one they're going to go with, but you can kind of get a feel for what they're thinking. So every once in a while, I'll just pop in there and kind of skim these things. But the idea is that they've got a plan and they're thinking about such things. It's not conspiracy theory to think that there's going to be a new global monetary system.
Yeah,
And then
and they
it's
want it to all be this centralized, app token system that they have essentially total surveillance and control over, and it becomes an algorithm. Um, which is what the jab passes are about. I guess I could say that now. I'll say my suspicion is that that's what those passes are for, because, then they connect ultimately back to your bank account, and your taxes, and it's all in a centralized place. And that's what they're hoping will be on the other side of the monetary system, in my opinion. How about you?
Yeah, I think you summarized it perfectly. I agree 100%. And then to your question about will gold be the opposite? It's been manipulated lower. Will it be manipulated higher? 100%. I've said this several times in your show, but Jim Sinclair told me, when it goes, those bankers will be on the right side, and they're going to profit from it going up as well. And there's a reason that major central banks and governments around the world are accumulating physical gold and silver hand over fist, because they know what's coming. There's a saying, follow the money, and the smart money, the institutions, JP Morgan, the big banks, the high net worth individuals, they're all accumulating physical metal while telling, the retail investors, oh, it's a pet rock. You don't need to own that stuff, while they're buying it themselves.
Did I send you that news article of that teacher in Georgia, I believe it was, that she thought her kid was sick, like her 11-year-old, so she put him in the trunk of her
Yeah.
car.
Yeah. That was in,
I sent you that,
in
right?
Texas. Yeah. It was in Texas.
That was in Texas. Uh, Someone made a funny meme, and it said, "Not good, by the way. That person should not be allowed. They shouldn't have kids. They've psychologically damaged people." And I was reading a meme, and this meme said, the uh, the same people that tell you you're a conspiracy theorist for preparing or prepping are the same people locking their kids in their trunks, uh, because they're afraid, while they have trust the science bumper stickers on their trunk with their kid in the back of it.
Oh my gosh. The world
It,
has truly gone insane. You can't make this stuff up.
it's was pretty funny, the meme, and the reason I bring it up is because the meme was saying, they've behavioral science has gone in such a way that it's become a conspiracy theory to like prep and be prepared, right? And so let's talk about some of those solutions um, that a lot of people that are eating and drinking the media's Kool-Aid are going to be unaware for, right? So you talked about gold, silver. Give me your 3-step or your 5-step plan to prepare for these interesting times, these unstable, unpredictable times.
Sure. And if I had to condense, I'll condense it down to kind of three important areas. But if for the listener who's maybe new to all this, sometimes there could be the sense that you have to go, sell everything, pile all into gold and silver, buy 3 years of food supply, and just completely exit everything normal. You don't have to do that. You can just take a small percentage of your overall assets and net worth and put them into these things and look at it as an insurance policy that hopefully you don't need. That's one way to think about it. But we talked about silver and gold. I also think about food. Our supply chains are highly, highly, vulnerable, as we've seen over the last couple of years. So, having six to 12 months of food on hand, especially if you buy things that you can eat anyway, no harm in that. And if you don't get to it by the expiration date, there's plenty of food banks who could use it. So that's just totally makes total sense to me, having 6 to 12 months of food on hand. Then I also think about energy. As we've seen around the world, our grids are highly, highly unstable as well. So, look at some backup power. We have a solar generator, and I even put it in an EMP bag. So, it's protected. So, I can power my fridge and stuff if the grid goes down for any period of time. So those are three big ones I'd think about. Also, water. Water is important. For me, I like Berkey water filters. You can filter just about any. You can take rainwater. You could take pond water, anything, and turn it into potable drinking water through a Berkey water filter. So those are just a couple of things to think about.
So that's the prepping dynamic. How does gold and silver and mining stocks and silver chartists fit into the equation of what's happening in the world right now? For those that want to check it out, the free newsletter is right there down below, linked to the comments and in the description right there down below. It's the Silver Chartist newsletter. But how does that link into everything?
Absolutely. Yeah. Money isn't everything, but having extra money can go a long way in helping you to have freedom, time freedom to pursue life's higher callings, things that really matter in life. And that's really what we all want, right? Time freedom to pursue what we care about. And, you know, getting your finances in order can help you with that. So I think of silver and gold as kind of insurance, preserving my purchasing power, where mining stocks, when the cycle hits and when gold and silver do their next move, mining stocks can really uh, amplify your gains. And, I think of silver and gold as defense, mining stocks as offense. And that's what we focus on in the Silver Chartist report. We've got a nice team, David Brady, Jeff Clark. He's one of the top mining stock analysts in the world, in my opinion. And we do a report every week. It's an over-the-shoulder service with real-time alerts. I show you exactly what I'm buying and what I'm selling and why I'm doing it. So if you'd like to check that out, just hit the link right below this video, get the free report, and you'll have the option to upgrade to a low-ticket premium option as well if you're interested.
Thanks for watching today's video. Make sure you check out Silver Chartist right there down below. We appreciate Steve coming on if you want to learn more about mining stocks and ways to take advantage of this wealth transfer, which at the end of the day, we could talk on and on and on about how insane the world's getting. But my New Year's resolution is to focus as best as I can on the things that I can control. And one of those components is career and finances. Because it's going to be the token of independence as things continue to shift in the world. And one of those ways I highly recommend that you consider doing that is at least by checking out Steve's Silver Chartist free newsletter right there down below in the description and pinned to the comments. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, bell notifications, what notifies you for future episodes. And so give us a comment down below. Let us know what you think of today's episode. Comment down below. Steve rules. Steve, any last words?
No, appreciate it, brother. Look forward to speaking again soon. And thanks for inviting me on.